All right, everybody. Today I have the pleasure of being here and talking with Karen Green. She is I'm going to say, a female pioneer in the study of forensic medicine and was crime scene investigation and analysis way before it was ever seen on TV and like CSI or other things, and really one of the female, especially pioneers in the industry. Would you say that's accurate, Karen?
I Pioneer is a lofty title, but yeah, I'm a forensic scientist, not necessarily forensic medicine,
Okay.
but forensic science. So I do specialize in DNA analysis and crime scene investigation and reconstruction. And I started my internship in 1992. And at the time I started that, I would say, I want to be a forensic scientist. And people would say, well, what's forensic science? So they couldn't even say the word. So yeah, it definitely was a great time for me to get in and I guess pioneer in that way, in the fact that no one knew what it was. And then once CSI caught the national media, was on TV, it's just exploded in popularity. So now everyone knows what a forensic science is.
More people can say it and spell it.
Yes, absolutely.
So it was, especially then, was an interesting career choice. It's still a career choice that is not for most people. Can you give us your journey, kind of the backstory? What led you down that road, and just kind of piqued your interest, and then really got you into the science, into the field?
I've always been interested in science. I actually went to Washington State University. I wanted to be a paleontologist, as your wife can attest. I was into dinosaurs my whole life, and I was never really embarrassed about it. I liked dinosaurs.
Sure.
And so I went in to be a geologist. And so I already had the basic science courses down. And then my sophomore year, my dad was a Seattle police officer, and he took me on a tour of the Seattle crime lab. And an hour later, I walked out and I knew absolutely this is what I wanted to do. I loved the science. I loved the law, but I didn't really ever want to be a police officer. I respected what my dad did, but I didn't think that was for me. But suddenly I had this marriage of science and this law-based career, and I immediately changed focus and decided that forensics is what I was going to do.
Was there anything on that tour specifically that sticks out in your mind as, oh, that's for me? Was there a moment? Was there a thing?
There was one thing. I mean, the whole thing was fascinating, but I remember they have microanalysts, trace analysts that look at hair and fibers and soil. And this one analyst was telling me about a sexual assault case he'd worked. And the female had said that her clothing had been ripped. And he looked at her clothing under the microscope and determined that the fibers, instead of being ragged as they would if they were torn, they were cut. They were very blunt. And so faced with that information, they went back and they talked with the female, and she admitted that she had staged the entire thing. And he knew that just because he could tell a cut from a tear. And I was amazed at the level of detail that they go into and the hours they go into searching all these things and then these conclusions. So for me, it was huge. Like, what else can we do here? I think this is fascinating.
That's outstanding. And so you got into the field. How many years of school? Where did that take you down? Kind of build on that a little bit. Because I'm sure there's a lot of misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what goes into this.
There really is. And I would say that for any of your younger readers at this point, if you want to be a forensic scientist in the crime lab analyzing evidence, it's a science degree. So for the Washington State Patrol, if you want to work in the crime lab, you have to have a hard science, chemistry, microbiology, biology, physics. And then if you want to be a DNA analyst, you have to have additional hours of statistics, molecular biology, genetics. So it's very important when these kids get out of college that they're not getting out with just a criminalist degree or criminal justice. They actually have to have those hard chemistry and physics courses, and then they can get into the lab. So because I knew I wanted to work for the Washington State Patrol, I did some research on what they wanted. And so my biology degree actually required additional hours of chemistry and physics. So I actually I'm 2 credits shy of a chemistry minor, but I had to fulfill those just to get this job. And then I just have a Bachelor of Sciences in biology because, again, back in 1995, not a lot of competition. The master's and some of the PhD programs that they have now didn't even exist. And then the rest of my journey was really on the job training.
Right. And so you probably, you've got more than a PhD equivalent with all the years of training, I'm sure.
I think that is one really interesting thing about forensics. I mean, I appreciate schooling and the studies and those advanced degrees, but when we're talking about crime scene, you can work all the mock crime scenes you want, and it's not ever going to be the same as that first real life crime scene that you go to. And there's simply no way to replicate a crime scene in the academic environment. So I think crime scene investigation certainly is a lot more on the job than other studies.
Yeah, I can imagine that 100%. Now you must see some pretty gruesome things in your travels. I assume that doesn't really affect you. It doesn't, you're not squeamish.
I am not squeamish. I think we have established that even as a kid, I wasn't squeamish with that. But yeah, it's a tough career to be in. I, for whatever reason, can see the things I see, and I don't have the nightmares that I know people have. One of the things that is finally coming up now in crime scene investigation is we do have more peer support. Because for a long time you had to be the tough guy and we're tough and this stuff doesn't bother us. And then people started committing suicide and doing terrible things and having these huge depression. And it's because it does affect you and you can't just keep stuffing it down scene after scene after scene. So for my team, even I was the coordinator for the Washington State Patrol statewide crime scene response team. And one of the things I instituted is you don't have to talk, but if you go to a dead baby or maybe a dead police officer or a sextuple homicide, I'm going to ask you to at least go talk to the peer support people. And if you just want to sit there, that's fine. But what I found is most people, once they were in a private environment, they did talk. And it just kind of opened some doors for communication that I don't think we previously had.
It's kind of the equivalent of PTSD for a soldier on the field, a law enforcement officer in a shooting kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't ever try and equate us to what they're seeing out in the field, but yeah, I mean, I think that the toughest scene I worked in my career was a quadruple homicide of 4 police officers who were murdered as they sat drinking their morning coffee. And so to walk into that and see 4 uniformed officers, it was a lot to take. And a lot of the people that were on that scene with me, of all the scenes we've worked, that I know has stayed with all of us. So, you know, PTSD to some level, I think that definitely can play into it. So I would also say that to anyone interested in this career, be prepared. Be prepared for what you're going to see, and be prepared that maybe you're going to go out and see your first body and realize that this isn't for you once you actually get on scene and see some of these troubling things. And I've even been at dinner parties where I've been specifically asked to please not talk about my work because it's so troubling. So
you can imagine that.
Person.
I think my wife asked you not to send her any photos at one point because she is squeamish.
I believe that. Yes, we'll send Teresa the puppy photos or the cats, but yeah, no crime scene stuff, no blood stuff.
Yeah. Now, you've indicated to me that you've traveled a fair amount helping other police departments, whether it's in the U.S., outside the U.S., set up procedures, labs, that kind of thing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a really fascinating experience that I had when I was still with the Washington State Patrol. I met some folks that worked for the United States Department of Justice. They have a training program. It's called the International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program. And they have about 50 scientists at any given time traveling around the world, helping other countries establish their forensic program. So they approached me and asked if I would be interested in helping them out. And that was one of the big reasons I ended up leaving the Washington State Patrol, is I didn't want to give up this opportunity to travel internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out in Mexico. I spent almost 4 years down in Mexico. I'd go about 1 week every month. And I primarily was in Mexico City, but there was about 4 different states I visited. And we basically were helping them gain an international accreditation in DNA analysis. And then I moved to Sri Lanka, their government analyst lab. It's the equivalent of their FBI. They were building their very first DNA lab, forensic DNA lab.
Wow.
So yeah, new building, new equipment, new programs, just an amazing group of people to work with. And it was very satisfying to go in and teach them something that you think is kind of mundane, that you've always done, and you think they're going to be bored, and they love it. It's the first time they've been exposed to this. It was very gratifying to introduce them to some of these techniques. And then I did some crime scene training down in Paraguay and Colombia. So mostly it was the Mexico and the Sri Lankan programs that I assisted with.
Wow. And how many other women were there on these training teams doing what you do? Was there any?
Yes, there are others, and we didn't necessarily go in teams. We just kind of go by ourselves when we had the time. So the thing about the DNA field is that actually is very female heavy. When you go to some of these DNA conferences in the labs, the majority of DNA analysts are women, and we don't exactly know why. We don't want to take anything away from the men, but it's been speculated that women, we have a big attention to detail. We're very highly organized and very meticulous. And so for whatever reason, the DNA group is largely women. The crime scene side, when I was visiting Colombia, in that case, I was with a team, and it was me and 5 other men, 4 Colombian police officers and another analyst from the United States. And the vast majority of my class were men. So there is kind of a line between the lab work in DNA analysis and the field work in crime scene. Mm-hmm. More women now are starting to go after crime scenes. I mean, now the Washington State Patrol team was fairly female heavy, but for whatever reason, historically, there was kind of that difference between going out to the field and staying in the lab.
Nice. I kind of want to explore the part of you helping people set things up and get things rolling, whatever capacity that was in different places. You obviously you got to have a high level of confidence for yourself and knowing that what you do is right procedurally and extensive training, right? Because there can't be any mistakes in what you do, because people go to jail and bad things, a lot rides on your work. And I guess on the flip side of that also, it can be disturbing for people, as you definitely indicated. What do you do to help people? Do you have a specific way or mechanism or model that you use to help teach people the special skills that you have and what they need to be proficient at their jobs and getting departments and other things set up?
With the DNA analysts, certainly the FBI has set out these quality assurance guidelines that have been in effect in the United States for years. And it's just a very easy checklist of the training your analysts have to have, the proficiency testing they have to go through, competency testing, and then in the laboratory, how you maintain your machines, how you calibrate your instruments, how you do quality control checks on all of your kits. So for the DNA, that's very easy to go into these other labs and implement all of these checklists. So like one of the big things in some of these other countries is they'll get a DNA kit into the lab and they just immediately use it on casework. And one of the things that we'll teach so you can be accredited is that you need to quality check that kit. Because if I have a single drop of blood that's 1 millimeter in size and I have to use that entire speck of blood to get a DNA profile, and I use it on a kit that's faulty because I haven't checked it, well, now that evidence is completely gone. So as you said, we can't have those mistakes. So just basic quality assurance and quality control is one of the big things that we take to those other countries. And then in crime scene, there's a little less regulation. We're working on that right now. There are a lot of lab systems around the country now that are accredited in crime scene investigation, but it's a little harder to regulate crime scene because every single crime scene we go to is going to be different. And in this one, it's raining, and in this one, it's daylight, and maybe you're in a house that's been burned down, and now there's fire suppression. So it's much, much harder to regulate how you work a crime scene. So we have very general best practice guidelines. The photos you need to take, the measurements you need to take, how many notes you need to take. One of our mottos is, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So when I would go out to a crime scene, I'm going to come back with 40 pages of handwritten notes that talk about everything I see and everything I did and everything I collected. So it's very easy for someone on the back end to see what I did out there. So a lot of the crime scene stuff is talking about the documentation. And then also just how to think through a scene, not just to go out and pick up a cartridge case and a cartridge case and a blood swab, but really analyze how that blood got there. And so part of what I try and teach is, I call it crime scene analysis versus simply crime scene processing. It's a lot of talking, sorry.
No, that's awesome. I find it fascinating. Again, there's, we all, those of us that are not in this, only see things on TV. And of course, you must get a million questions about things that are possible. And I saw this on this TV show. And of course, a vast majority of it has got to be totally TV. So I think to have the real inside scoop of what it is fascinating. And I think people watching this will find it fascinating. So
I've actually had people at crime scenes come up to me, and the officers will watch. Maybe we're searching a car for blood, and they'll say, this is actually really boring. It's way more exciting on TV.
There's no script.
Yeah, no script. And what we actually, it can be quite monotonous. And especially, when we're looking for really, really tiny blood stains in a car or on a bed sheet, and I don't want to introduce extra chemicals, I'll swab an entire comforter with multiple Q-tip swabs and find a blood stain that is barely visible with the naked eye, but it's an effective technique. It just takes a long time and a lot of patience. So it is not as exciting as it seems on TV, but it's still pretty.
I'm sure it is. Hey, can you share a time maybe where you were on a scene or in a lab or something where your confidence and your skills really shine through? Like maybe the rest of the people in that environment were confused, didn't know what to do, a state of disarray where you kind of had to step up and lead the charge unexpectedly, maybe even, and take control.
Again, I hate to say I was shining through, but one of my roles, so as the head of the statewide crime scene response team, it was my job to gather the team and send them out across the state. So we had one particularly massive scene up north, and it ended up, there were 6 people that had been killed over an area that was about 10 miles long. This scene just kept unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And it was really a tragic scene. And there were officers that were shot and another officer that was killed. And so that was one of those scenes where I don't know when I got the first call, it was just a single person had been killed. And then all of a sudden calls. So I did have to step up and I took 13 people up there. We were up there for 5 days. Wow. And then step into this position with the lead detectives to try and coordinate this massive crime scene effort. And how are we going to get all the scenes worked, and how are we going to deal with the news? And my small part, even as the forensic side, because obviously there's the detectives and the investigators from the other agencies. But even that part for me was pretty massive. And when I was done, kind of an odd little story, one of my good friends from college had just given birth to her first child. And I had just gotten back from this scene. And so we were talking on the phone, and she said, "Karen, man, that labor, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life." And I started to laugh. I'm like, what I just did was actually the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So these two experiences are completely different, but we both were like that. That was amazing, but we survived. And it was kind of a funny moment for me.
That's awesome. But obviously things like that take a lot of confidence, a lot of self-assurance. Is there one thing or maybe a moment, maybe a person, one thing that you can attribute your level of self-confidence to?
I have an amazing family, and I have amazing parents. I know, Teresa grew up with my family, and my parents would be at all of our soccer games. I think my mom got some type of certificate for 100% attendance at all of the sporting events I ever did. And my dad was a police officer, obviously, so he made as many as he could. But going back to my childhood there, I have to give them a lot of credit for the way they encouraged me. My dad took me aside once. He's like, don't listen to anyone else tell you how you have to live your life. He's like, you are better than you are. And I believe in your dreams, and you really need to reach for them. And it just gave me a lot of confidence that I know there's a lot of ways to get through this life, but I don't have children. And when you're being told as a kid, well, you're going to have kids, you're going to change your mind, you have to have kids. And then to have someone in your life take you aside and say, you can do whatever you want, you can succeed in this life. That was huge for me. So I attribute a lot of it to my family. But on the flip side, being completely honest, when I think of myself, I have a lot of doubts, and I walk into some of these big scenes, and there is fear there. And I know that I can do it, but there is always that fear, which for me, I think is actually a good thing. I think anyone who walks into a big testimony or into a big murder scene or anything in life that is overconfident, those are the people that scare me a little bit, when they think they're perfect and they have no fear.
Sure.
In my experience, they're the ones that maybe are just, they take things a little too far. So I try and balance it between confidence and a healthy amount of fear as I go into anything huge.
That's great. When you have to learn a new skill, which obviously you've had to master a variety of different things here to get where you are, what's the thought process? Do you have a specific way that you break things down, or triggers for yourself that make you go, okay, this is what I need to do? Can you elaborate on that? Does that make sense? The question make sense?
I think it does make sense, but I have not ever sat down and really analyzed what my process is. I mean, I'm sure I have one, but I've never taken the time to step by step lay it out. So I don't have a great answer for that.
All right. Well, I had to stump you with something.
You did. Thank you.
How would you define self-confidence?
Oh, you're going to stump me again, back to back.
Well, I know you can answer this because it's whatever's right for you. How do you define that?
Well, actually, I think that's a great definition, whatever is right for you. For me, self-confidence, as I previously said, I think has a little bit of fear, but I think it's the courage to know that I'm going to go into this situation and I'm going to be confident and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I think understanding that maybe it's not going to be perfect, but knowing that you're still going to survive, that's what allows me to tackle some of the things I have that I've never done them before, but I know that, and whatever happens is going to be the best job that I think I can produce. So that gives me confidence that I know it's going to be at least my best product.
Awesome. Just a couple more questions and I'll let you go. Do you do a fair amount of teaching and instruction for other people? You have, at least, even if maybe not at the moment. Do you have a specific training model or teaching model that you use to teach other people?
I don't know if it's a specific model, but one of the things I like to take into my crime scene courses is I have my own cases that I have worked over time and my analysis and what I did and how I did it. But I found it very effective to actually have them send me some of their casework. So it's quite a lot of effort on my end. But if a month or two before the course, they send me some of their cases and I take teaching points from those, I have found that to be very effective because now they're familiar with their scene. They know what they did. And now I'm introducing additional aspects that they could have considered. And so I don't know if that's a model, but it's one of the effective tools I feel like I've used.
No, that's perfect. What would be your message to someone who needs like a little, maybe someone who's coming into this field or another to kind of a message that, or give them a boost of confidence to achieve and excel at what they want to do? If you were going to offer a piece of advice to someone you knew.
Well, I think it's one, what my dad said to me is that you're better than you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to believe in that. And then I also think it's understanding that just because you're scared doesn't mean you can't do it. I remember specifically standing on the gangplank to board that plane to Colombia by myself thinking, I don't know if I want to do this, but then taking that next step and getting on and having it be one of the best experiences of my life. So yeah, you're better than you think you are, and being scared is okay, but just follow through.
That's perfect. At that time, was Pablo Escobar still around in his group?
He was not, but I actually was working with one of the men that was a part of the task force that helped to take him down. So it was fascinating. You think you're there doing this exciting job, and then you speak to someone else who's just, 10 levels above you that have done some amazing things. So it's been a great career. And I guess that would be the other piece of advice, is to understand that even if you're pretty confident and you think you're doing a great job, always be on the lookout for those people who are even better than you, and you can
Sure.
strive to be better all the time.
That kind of leads me to my last real question is, do you have a favorite motivational quote? Something you live by, something you think about?
It's funny that you ask that. I should know where it came from, but there is one quote, and I probably don't even have it completely perfect, but it was something like, don't be afraid of the strange things that you're drawn to, because it will not lead you astray. And I feel like I kind of live by that motto. I'm a little quirky, and I like things that a lot of people don't like, and I see beauty in things that other people think are terrible, but it hasn't led me astray. I love where I'm at in my life, and I feel really happy with the decisions I've made. So yeah, I should come up with all the exact words on that, but yeah, don't be afraid of what the heart loves.
You nailed the sentiment for sure.
Okay.
Well, for anybody that sees this, maybe they want to use your services, or maybe they just find it, the field, interesting, whatever. How could people reach you, find you, so that they could maybe make contact with you or your company? And
Yeah, I'm always happy to field questions. I love to encourage excitement about the field. So they can visit www.green-forensics.com. And on there is my address. My email address is just Karen@green-forensics.com. And I do receive a fairly regular, steady email traffic about what can I do, and can I interview, and can you answer this questionnaire. I try as hard as I can to answer all of those, but certainly if you want to try set up a phone interview is easiest for me, just to chat like this. But
awesome.
Yeah, I welcome the questions. I'd love to encourage anyone to get into the field.
Awesome. Well, Karen, I want to thank you for sharing. And as I told you before, I think you've got an incredible story, incredible journey, much more even than you think you do. And I realize that you're humble, and that's awesome. That's an awesome thing. But you're someone that we definitely consider to be limitless, and you're a great role model and example for others. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you so much for considering me. I'm thrilled with the project. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm just going to say goodbye and say thank you, and look forward to chatting with you soon.
As well. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.